If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. micro-tabb.com.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
And welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. Are Chinese troops headed to a new training facility in Cuba, raising the prospect of Chinese military right at America's doorstep? This comes as the Biden administration appears to be on an appeasement visit in Beijing. And joining us now to discuss this and so much more is the best Asia expert out there, Gordon Chang. He is the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. His Twitter is Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Rita.
What was your reaction to Secretary of State Antony Blinken over there in Beijing? Did it seem like an appeasement visit?
It certainly did, and it was a debacle. Even before the visit was formally announced by the State Department, China was insulting our Secretary of State, and they certainly didn't let up during the trip. The arrival in Beijing was bare bones, meant to humiliate. He was basically forced to spend most of his time with a junior official in China. Qin Gang, although he bears the title of foreign minister, is not of comparable rank to Antony Blinken. And the big issue was whether Blinken would actually meet Xi Jinping. It was confirmed at the last moment that he would. And they had 35 minutes, a grand total of 35 minutes. And basically, that's like a 10-minute meeting because you have to account for translation. Really, what had happened here is we saw the seating arrangements when China's leader met Blinken, and it was clear that Blinken was put into a position where it appeared that he was basically a supplicant coming to the Grand Celestial Court. Xi Jinping was seated at the head of the table. He was by himself. He looked like he was the emperor of the world. And that's what China wants to do. So it just was a ill-conceived trip from the very beginning. Let's remember that this trip was postponed because of the spy balloon incident. You know, that Blinken was trying to repair relations. Well, it should have been the Chinese trying to do that because they're the ones who grossly violated our sovereignty by flying that large object over our nuclear weapons site. So this was just wrong on all counts.
You know, you brought up the spy balloon. We also heard from Blinken basically afterwards saying, well, it looks like chapter closed. What was your reaction to that?
How could it be chapter closed? What cost did we impose on China to prevent that from happening again? It appears that basically the Chinese said, no, we're not going to do it again. And so for Blinken, the chapter was closed. But let's remember, it is not. The American people are outraged by it. And by the way, there's somebody whose name is Joseph Biden, who, after Blinken said the matter was closed, then gave some comments at a fundraiser in California. And basically, Biden said that Xi Jinping didn't know what was going on during the spy balloon, and that's embarrassing for dictators. Well, the Chinese were, quote unquote, outraged by Biden calling Xi Jinping a dictator. So the matter is not closed. This is something that still is very much on the consciousness of Americans as well as Biden himself.
You brought up those two layers to President Biden's conversation, Gordon Chang, and his remarks. One of them, first, let's talk about the first part, the embarrassing part. Seemed like he was making excuses for the Chinese, too. He's like, oh, it just looks like maybe it went off course and was embarrassing for the Chinese. Any American who knows the details, anybody around the world, they know that it was hovering over U.S. military installations, getting intel. We know it was transmitting back, and then we didn't even shoot it down until it goes off of Surfside Beach, South Carolina, after it traversed the country. We had every opportunity to do that. It sure doesn't look like it was just some mistake that just happened to pop over these military bases. Why do you make it that? Why do you think Biden even went there to try to make excuses for it?
I think that Biden tried to do that because he wants to patch up relations, as he says. He wants to talk about climate change. He wants to talk about other things. And so he feels that if people talk in truthful tones about China, that the Chinese will be so upset that they won't talk to him. Biden has those comments at the fundraiser in California, echoed comments he had a couple Saturdays ago when he said the same thing on the White House lawn. And it was wrong for the president of the United States to repeat Communist Party talking points to the American people. We hear enough of this from Beijing anyway. We don't need to hear it from the person that we elected to defend ourselves from a militant communist state.
He also used the phrase, just as you said, on one hand, he's saying it's embarrassing, he's making excuses, and then he uses the phrase dictator. Talk about sort of the mixed messages, I think, coming from this president.
I think that Biden was, they call these things gaffes when people actually tell the truth. And, this was one of those moments where, if Biden wanted to maintain and build friendly relations with Beijing, he shouldn't have told the truth. But it's good that he did that because that is the start of a good U.S. policy. Now, unfortunately, Biden is not going to continue that. But the point is, for the American people, it highlights the issue. We need to tell the truth about China. We need to tell the truth, even though it's going to enrage totalitarians in Beijing, because if we don't tell the truth, we will never get to a good policy on China. And by that, I mean starting to defend ourselves from fentanyl, from COVID-19, from all the rest of it. Biden is just trying to sugarcoat this. And because he is the person who the Constitution charges with defending us, and he's not defending us, we're in a heck of a lot of trouble.
This shrimp and coconut sauce is divine. What's your secret?
Goya coconut milk.
How does it taste so good?
It's all in that real coconut flavor and that rich, creamy texture.
What about thickeners and added sugars?
None. Just smooth, coconutty goodness.
What can I make with it?
From curries to sweet treats like coconut flan, the possibilities are endless.
Goya coconut milk. Take your cooking to the next level. No question about it. Find it in the Goya section of your local grocery store. If it's Goya, it has to be good.
Yeah, it is really scary. The other thing, too, is Secretary of State Antony Blinken also made the comment that they do not support, that America doesn't support independence for Taiwan. A lot of people were surprised because it's always been sort of an ambiguous policy, if you will. What was your reaction when you heard him say that? He
basically should not have said that. It gets a little complicated. If you look at U.S. foreign policy, our one China policy, yes, we do not support Taiwan independence. Our policy is based, as Blinken said, on the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 communiques, and the 6 assurances. And by the way, it was good for Blinken to mention the 6 assurances because those are important elements of our defense of Taiwan. But after the Chinese had humiliated Blinken, day after day, he should not have said anything that Beijing wanted to hear. And I think that essentially, you get to pick your words when you're a diplomat, and sometimes it's important not to say things. He should not have said something like that, because I can tell you that officials in Taiwan are privately dismayed by Blinken's visit. And people around the region believe that China humiliated the United States and that Blinken just took it, showing weakness on the part of the administration. So this is something that he should not have said. To your point about sort of the impression around the world, just as you talked about earlier too, Gordon Chang, was also
this last minute, okay, come meet with me, as she did with Blinken. He's about to leave. It's a brief meeting, puts him in a sort of lower diminutive seat location. All of that, better than anybody that Chinese propaganda is using this over and over again. Look, they came to us. Look where we put him. Look how we treated him. All of this. And then playing that comment, too, about Taiwan. This was a huge PR win for China.
It certainly was. Xi Jinping's main form of diplomacy these days is intimidation. He wants the world that the United States is finished and that he, Xi, is boss of the world. And that was the clear message on March 22nd when Xi Jinping was bidding farewell to Vladimir Putin in Moscow after the end of their 40th in-person chat, where Xi Jinping said that change is coming that hasn't happened in 100 years, and you and I, remember he's talking to Putin, and you and I are driving this change together. So really what the United States needs to do is to basically put China in its place. We need to show the world that we are a far stronger society, which we are. You look at the metrics, there's no question that we're a far stronger society. And China right now is in a state of distress, which is the reason why we have this unprecedented surge of Chinese migrants coming across our southern border. So this is a point where the United States needs to have basically a propaganda defense because China has this propaganda war on us. It is unrelenting. It is malicious. It's just day after day, Rita. We need to start defending ourselves, and we haven't been doing that.
You talked about the border. As you brought up, there have been so many Chinese migrants coming into the United States, a huge portion, increasing exponentially. And yet we're also getting fentanyl coming from China. And I haven't heard this administration really take China to task. Can you kind of talk about the role China plays also with that and how we really have been just silent? I think this administration seems to have been to China on it.
Yeah, Xi Jinping runs a total or a near total surveillance state. He knows everything that the large fentanyl gangs are doing because they're well organized and they're international in scope. But we don't have to speculate because we know that Chinese diplomats support the fentanyl gangs. And those gangs actually launder their proceeds through the Chinese state banking system. So China wants Americans to die from fentanyl. And according to the CDC's preliminary figures, we're talking somewhere 65 to 75,000 Americans who have died from doses of illegal Chinese fentanyl. We heard Blinken talk about fentanyl, about trying to establish a dialogue with the Chinese. Well, dialogue is well past over. When you start talking, more Americans are going to die in the interim. We need to hold the Communist Party accountable for killing Americans. We should designate it a transnational criminal organization. We should prosecute it under the RICO statutes. That's racketeer, influence, corrupt organizations. We should be going after the Chinese hard because Americans in large numbers are dying, Rita. There's no time for talking anymore. This is just long past the time where we should have any sort of conversation with the Chinese about fentanyl. We need to impose those costs immediately.
Do you see this administration doing that? I mean, they don't seem to be doing anything vis-a-vis the border. They seem to, like the word fentanyl barely comes out of their mouth. You mentioned Blinken barely mentions it. Biden barely mentions it. They just seem to not want to draw attention to what has been an open border with easy fentanyl coming back and forth.
Yeah, they don't want to talk about it. I mean, about a year ago, President Biden had a statement on fentanyl. He did not have the word China in it at all. I mean, that's just wrong. This is an administration that is trying to appease China. And this is just, we know appeasement doesn't work. One could argue that the appeasement of the weak is an acceptable policy. I don't think it is, but people argue that. But you can't appease a regime that thinks it's strong because we know what happens then. Apparently nobody in the administration has ever thought about what happened in Europe in 1938 and 1939. They have no sense of history. And because of that, they are making the same mistakes. We are the Britain and France of the 21st century. We are the ones that are permitting a militant aggressor to start a global conflict. And by the way, it looks pretty global because it's not just Ukraine. The Chinese and Russians are destabilizing North Africa. It's starting to look like a war. If China invades somebody on its periphery, that's World War III, because that'll be war across the Eurasian landmass and Africa.
Yeah, that is stunning. I also want to continue down south, too. This new news, too, that Chinese troops seem to be headed to a training facility in Cuba. I mean, here it is, 90 miles plus about just off our coast of the United States. Could that be?
Well, it could be, because, the Wall Street Journal reporting about that. Blinken, when he was in Beijing and afterwards, has talked about how the administration is doing all it can to stop that from occurring. But he never says what the Chinese response has been. He just says, well, we've been trying to prevent that. The thing about this is the Biden administration has sugarcoated the Chinese involvement in Cuba. There have been 4 Chinese listening posts in Cuba directed at the United States. And they have been there probably all of the century or for most of the century. We know the names of 3 of them because they've been in open sources for a very long time. Lourdes, Yucall, and Santiago de Cuba. And the Biden administration tried to prevent the American people from knowing about that a couple of weeks ago. So really what we have here is an administration that is in disarray, does not know what to do with Cuba, doesn't know what to do with China. And now we got Cuba and China together, and that sort of makes us think Cuban Missile Crisis round 2.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.
Yeah, you're right. And of course, what a frightening period of history that was. As we're looking at now, how concerned should we be, Gordon Chang, if indeed Chinese troops do amass at this training facility? I mean, that is right at our doorstep.
Yes. Well, what they'll do is they will have, let's say, surface-to-air missiles. They'll have surface-to-ship missiles. That means they'll be able to attack the United States on day 1 of a war in Asia. Bases in Florida and on the southeastern coast could very well be within range of Chinese weapons. Planes flying over the southeast United States could be brought down. And then they could be putting intercontinental or shorter or medium-range ballistic missiles tipped with nuclear weapons. The Chinese are pretty bold, so we should sort of assume that they'll do whatever they think they can get away with. And right now, they think they can get away with everything. So we do not need, Chinese nuclear weapons just 94 miles from Key West.
Yeah, that is an enormous, enormous concern, especially given the fact that they seem to be, just as you pointed out with Russia and so many things, emboldened. In the middle of all this, too, Gordon Chang, it's astounding to me that we haven't done anything to hold the Chinese accountable about the origins of COVID. They haven't allowed the scientists in there in the Wuhan lab just to even inspections or anything. Are you amazed? Here it is so many years later, so many people died, millions around the world, and yet somehow China's getting a pass, at least from us.
It's getting a pass, not from the American people. It's getting a pass from the Biden administration. Biden himself has had 6 or 7 video calls or phone calls with Xi Jinping and 1 in-person meeting, which was last November. Not once during those occasions has Biden raised the origins of COVID-19. And we've got to remember that this is 1.1 million Americans have died from this disease, according to Johns Hopkins. This week, we had the passage of the deadline for the administration to release intelligence on the origins of COVID they missed that deadline. And I'm afraid that they are not going to release that because that there must have been a discussion between Blinken and his Chinese interlocutors about the release of that COVID stuff, because China really wants to prevent the world from knowing. And, I can understand why China would want to do that, because of their grossly irresponsible and I believe murderous activities regarding the spread of COVID-19. But, the United States should be trying to disclose this. This is the deaths of more than 1 million Americans. So, Rita, this is just an abrogation of President Biden's most solemn constitutional obligation, which is to defend the United States from foreign attack. He's not doing it. He shouldn't be in office if he doesn't want to do it. I can understand why he doesn't want to get into unpleasant conversations with the Chinese, but that's okay as long as he's no longer president. If he wants to be president, he needs to defend us.
Yeah, that is the first and foremost duty of any American president. Of course, this week we also saw the Indian Prime Minister in Washington, and some of the discussions were about the role that India could play in a helpful way, say economically, moving U.S. business maybe from China, dependence on China in a lot of areas. Maybe can India fill in some of the gaps? I mean, shouldn't we be looking for more alternatives?
Well, we certainly should be. We should be trying to bring our supply chains, making them resilient, which means either bringing them into the United States or at least on this side of the Pacific. Going to India is better than China. And really what India can do is it is a counterweight. It has been traditionally close to Russia, but, a lot of people, including me, are pretty upset at what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been doing in connection with the Ukraine war. But as Russia has failed there, it means that India has no choice. It has to drop its relations with Moscow, which is failing, and it needs to build them with the United States, because we are the only country that can help them, because China is trying to break apart India. And so India doesn't have very many choices, which means, there are a lot of people in the United States who criticize India, and I can understand it. India does a lot of things which we don't like from any number of different perspectives. But we're in an existential struggle with China. We can lose our country. We are losing our country, and we need all the help we can get. So this is like the Cold War. If you lose, you're out of, you no longer exist. So we need India.
What do you see ahead for U.S.-China relations, short-term and long-term, Gordon Chang?
Short-term, let me preface this by saying that there's only going to be one survivor. It'll be either the People's Republic of China or the United States of America, not both. And so we need to make sure it's us, and we need to start defending ourselves, and we haven't been as a society. Short term, there's going to be so many problems, because even though the Biden administration wants to patch things up, you can't do it with a militant regime that doesn't respect Biden. And indeed, the American people are going to restrict Biden in what he can do. Long term, I just don't see that there's going to be two survivors. So it better be us.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Wow, what a powerful, powerful message. And everybody, be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. What an important message. Gordon Chang, so great to have you here and always get your really valuable insight. Gordon, thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.